Thank you, David. And we really do have a special guest, so I want to get right to it. Vera Sharav. And I'm trying to think of how to do her justice. So let me just say this. There are two kinds of people in this world. Those who have experienced real evil firsthand and know what it is, and those who haven't. And unfortunately, it's a great divide. And it's hard for people that haven't experienced it to wrap their minds around how bad it can get. Vera knows from her own life experience, starting as a child, things that she saw and experienced, mind-boggling. She has also been an activist for decades in the realm of medical freedom. Most people on this call are aware that the problems we're having today are not brand new, that they actually have a history. A long history. And Vera is someone who can credibly explain to us the depths of this history and how, in fact, it does trace back to the activities of Nazi Germany. It is not a light comparison. It's not a trivial comparison. It's a very accurate comparison. And tonight we're going to have someone who has spent decades studying corruption in the medical field, in the pharma field, who can also speak credibly to what it means when a government becomes absolutely evil. Vera, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. And I do want a copy of that video. It's very inspiring. I love it.
Canadians have such a great sense of humor.
It's very important to show it, really, the children and the whole thing, because they are getting a bad rap from those who would like to think that they are, some sort of marauders. Anyway.
And Vera, as you know, the very first thing a corrupt government will do before it attacks a population, it will slander and smear them first.
Oh, sure. Well, really, look, I mean, when governments seek to circumvent their constitutional limits and their authority, what do? They declare a state of emergency. It's exactly what Hitler did in 1933 when he suspended the Constitution and thereby ruled by decree. So in 2020, governments worldwide did exactly the same thing. They used the pandemic as an opportunity to declare emergency and rule by decree. And this is what we've been under for 2 years. There's no emergency, but there's a state of emergency. So we're really at a very critical juncture in history. Now we have a small cadre of extremely wealthy, extremely powerful global elites that are pushing very hard to establish a new system of corporate government dictatorship. And this is to be under the guise of public health. Now, Nazi propaganda used fear of infectious disease to demonize Jews as spreaders of disease. What separated the Holocaust from all other genocides until now was the close collaboration of the medical establishment. Doctors and scientists provided the veneer of legitimacy to infanticide, euthanasia, and mass medical murder. The Nazis utilized technology to rapidly implement their genocidal operations. They provided the technology to identify, to segregate, to track, to deport, imprison, exterminate the Jews of Europe and others whom they deemed unfit, inferior. The Nazi regime systematically obliterated moral norms. Academic, medical, scientific, and legal institutions were all infused with eugenics. Eugenics is a pseudoscience of racist ideology that has driven public health policies. It replaced the Hippocratic oath, first do no harm, and the physician's allegiance to the individual was redirected to the so-called greater good. Who decides what's the greater good? Medical profession and its institutions essentially were perverted from a healing profession to mass medical apparatus, a mass murder apparatus. And we are very close to that. Just as Hitler's rants about infectious epidemics were not about health, neither are today's state decrees and uniform medical interventions. They have nothing to do about protecting us against viruses. In 2020, governments followed the Nazi tactic. They used the powerful psychological weapon of fear and intense propaganda to impose decrees that suspended our freedom, our civil rights, and our human rights, including our right to protect our children. The Nazis fomented hatred by demonizing Jews, and today those who refuse to participate in the genetic experiment are being increasingly demonized as insubordinate. Governments are currently, as well as major employers, pressuring every man, woman, and child to submit to this new normal. The new normal involves total obedience. We who refuse the experimental injectables are threatened with being relegated to a future on the fringes of society, to a medical apartheid, an underclass, unfit for work, travel, education, or to enter public spaces where people gather. If you don't have the right to choose what goes into your body, and you are under threat of being ostracized and deemed an untouchable, social and economic outcast, then you don't have the right to decide anything. You are essentially a slave. People need to understand that. They will not ever get their freedom back unless they take it. Now, what's the justification for discriminating against the unvaccinated, since by now it's obvious the injections don't work? They don't prevent infection, and they don't prevent the spread of infection. So if that's the case, they do not measure up to the definition of a vaccine. They are gene transfer therapy and very, very experimental therapy. Now, today I learned of something. A January 22 State of Minnesota Department of Health directive. And I'm frankly, I was very shocked. And it's only a couple of hours before the show. Parents are being bribed to to sacrifice their children's lives and well-being. It's called Kids Deserve a Shot Vaccine Incentive Program. Now, I'm going to read from it because it is really shocking how those Department of Health bureaucrats put this together. This is evil. Here you can see something that is absolutely evil. Minnesota families who get their children, their kids, 5 to 11 years old, both their first and second doses in January and February, can get a $200 Visa gift card. Parents or guardians can register their 5 to 11-year-old once they have completed their 2-dose series. Registration for the 200 Visa gift card opened at 10 a.m. on January 24th. It closes at 11:59 p.m. on February 28th. Later this spring, there will be a drawing for 5 $100,000 Minnesota college scholarships for all Minnesotans 5 to 11-year-olds who are fully vaccinated. All Minnesotans 5 to 11 who complete their first and second doses at any point in time will be eligible to enter for a chance to win $100,000 college scholarship. Well, I ask anyone, can you please explain the mindset that put this together? That is telling parents, bribing parents to put their children's lives at risk. Look, if we don't insist on our right to control our life, if we don't disobey draconian dictates, even worse infringements will follow. Auschwitz did not begin with Auschwitz. It began in steps, in gradual stages, and we are doing those stages right now. They're being imposed on us. Now, let's not forget some of the strategic aspects of the pandemic. Let's go through them. The virus was genetically engineered in a laboratory within the context of illegal U.S. government-funded gain-of-function research, which is a euphemism for bioweapon research. 2, the World Health Organization designated a pandemic that did not meet the definition of a pandemic. Previous pandemics were determined by the death toll, not the number of cases. 3, faulty mathematical computer models vastly exaggerated the danger in order to create panic. 4, the faulty PCR test, which was never invented as a diagnostic tool. It cannot diagnose. It is known for its high degree of false positives. That's how you get millions of cases. Most of them are false positives. 5, an experimental mRNA gene transfer technology was fully developed in 2017. It functions in the body like a computer operating system, as stated by the CEO of Moderna. Now, how many people really want a computer operating system to be ticking away in their body? 6, mandatory biometric digital vaccine passports were in the planning stage in April 2018, 20 months before the outbreak of COVID-19. Let's get it clear. The injectable mRNA technology and the digital passports are the gateway to a totalitarian surveillance state. That's what they're for. 8, the driving force toward corporate managerial state is a small cadre of global megalomaniacs who are intent on implementing the Great Reset, which involves socially and genetically re-engineering humanity. These megalomaniacs truly believe that they can improve upon God and nature. The evidence of harm is piling up, and it is damning. The medical data from the U.S. Department of Defense is explosive, but the mainstream media has absolutely ignored it, lest some people not go for the vaccine. The original data is so damning that it is hard for anyone to refute that, because that database, unlike the vaccine adverse event information database, which the FDA and CDC run, this one, the DOD, is absolutely submitted by medical professionals. They capture the actual number of people harmed, whereas the VAERS database is but 1%, 10 at the most. So it is very it's as close as accurate as you can get. And it includes the entire Department of Defense. The data is absolutely damning. We're talking about between 60 and 70-fold increase in adverse events compared to 5 years before the injections. It's because they can't defend what's happening that they're hiding the data from the general public. Now, nobody can explain, you see, why suddenly there's this rise, all imaginable kind of illnesses. This isn't just myocarditis. There's a whole range, and one really needs to look at it. It's a very detailed document that was leaked, as most important data about COVID is leaked. Another example that shows the increased number of deaths is life insurance. Earlier in January, an Indiana life insurance company reported that the deaths among 18 to 64-year-olds increased by 40% since the period prior to COVID vaccines. Now, this is an astronomical increase. This isn't just a few points. We're talking about practically doubling. Insurance companies are not responsible. You see, they don't have to pay out the death benefit because this is an experimental injection. Now, in France, a judge ruled against plaintiffs who sought to collect life insurance policy of a man who died following the COVID shot. And the insurance company argued that deaths from experimental medicines are the same as suicide, which is not covered by any insurance. And this is what the judge ruled. I'll read. The side effects of the experimental vaccine are published, and the deceased could not claim not to have known anything about it when he voluntarily took the vaccine. There is no law or mandate in France that compelled him to be vaccinated. Hence, his death is essentially suicide. I want to stress that the vital lesson from the Holocaust, which many survivors who were quite prominent, some Nobel laureates like Elie Wiesel, they noted that what facilitated the Holocaust was the silence and indifference of those who watched and did nothing to prevent it. Silence, the onlookers, and the failure to intervene. That's what caused a Holocaust. And as Dietrich Bonhoeffer, German Protestant minister during the Hitler regime, stated, and quote, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." I think the best thing that's happened so far are the truckers in Canada, who hopefully will be a model for other truckers and other working class people who will rise up and say enough. They are our hope. And it's a fact that we really, really need to recognize that people who are not totally brainwashed can see the big lie. And they're really prompted to get up and take their chances and do what has to be done to stop it. I hope that others follow and that we will be rid of this. Of course, we really need to put the perpetrators on trial. This is terribly important After World War II, there were Nuremberg trials, but they only touched a tiny segment. Most of the Nazis got away with it. Germany lost the war, but the Nazis penetrated the United States, especially. The United States government brought over more than 1,600 scientists who were involved in all the atrocities. I'm yours to ask anything you want.
Okay, thank you so much, Vera, for that comprehensive explanation of where we're at. And I think it's time for people to realize that this is not really a debating society anymore. This is not really a let's trade information. It is a resistance time. It's time to act. We know enough now. We really don't need to have any more podcasts or I mean, I don't mean to diminish from that, but what's needed now is action, and it's our Canadian brothers and sisters who have shown what action looks like.
Yeah.
Because I'm just going to be blunt. I haven't seen a whole lot of action in the United States. Certainly not on the scale that we see in Canada. And this is what we need to start seeing here in the United States. Your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think that one of the strengths that the United States has been focused on, that the people who are involved in the forefront, are the legal defense. And they have been making strides, and we really shouldn't minimize it. Because in fact, the United States judicial system is better than any other. It's really kind of interesting, some of the things that one learns as one is in such a crisis situation. And that is really that the founding fathers of the United States were truly brilliant because they took into account human nature. Those checks and balances were precisely set in place so that recognizing that people will, if they can, if they're in positions of power, overextend their power and become, again, at that time wouldn't have been called dictatorship, but a monarchy. That's what they were afraid of, is going back to a monarchy. They didn't want a single rule. And the trouble is that for the last decades, many decades actually, those checks and balances are dysfunctional. Big corporate interests have bought them out. They rule the agencies, the FDA, the CDC, the EPA, all of it is captured. And that's really the downfall. That's what has caused a lot of the friction also between the parties, which the parties don't matter at all in terms of these corporate interests, because the checks are merely bigger for the party that has the president in the White House. But the Congress is bought, and I suspect people in the Supreme Court, and because it's not transparent, and it's supposed to. Nevertheless, even though the judicial, the judges are also prone, to being handled, nevertheless, there are enough of them who are not, or doing the right thing, because they can't be thrown out of office so easily. So that makes a big difference. At first, I used to think that was terrible, for lifetime, it's too long. Yeah, maybe lifetime is too long, but a long time on the bench is a good idea, so that they are not dependent, as Congress people are, for elections all the time and money for those elections. Because today, unless you get many millions of dollars, you can't make it into federal office, and probably not most state offices either. That's bad. That rules out the vast majority of people. How else would one explain how we have had one after another such poor candidates for the presidency? We couldn't have had worse ones than the last, 4 elections at least. How does that happen? Because these are puppets. Every one of them has been puppet. They've been bought. These are not the people who should represent a country like ours.